1. 3 years into marriage. Perry's little canary came to me. She loudly questioned me what right this yellow-faced woman had to stay by Perry's side. I calmly lifted my eyes. Just because it was me who accompanied him through the toughest years. The young girl held her head high, her eyes full of contempt. Just because you met Perry a few years earlier than me? Can this be a topic of conversation? When Perry appeared, he just saw the scene of me confronting his little canary. He slowly walked up to me and gently tucked my disheveled hair behind my ear. Arya, why are you here? I raised the phone in my hand. Didn't you ask me to come? Perry frowned slightly. The little canary behind him was a bit anxious and grabbed Perry's arm. Perry, I'm sorry. I sent it with your phone. I really don't want to live like this anymore. She turned and glared at me angrily. If it weren't for her always occupying the position of Mrs. Perry, we would have. Get out. Before the little canary could finish speaking, Perry interrupted her. What? The young girl was stunned, with moisture in her eyes. Mia. I said get out. Perry's voice was flat, and his gaze at the young girl was indifferent without a trace of affection. Why? The young girl bit her lip, her face a bit pale. She probably didn't understand. Clearly, the man who was extremely gentle to her in bed just yesterday had changed so much today. Compared to my wife. Are you worthy? Perry chuckled and spoke unhurriedly. I know that Perry will have no more entanglements with this girl in the future. She is too naive. Naive enough to take the games in the wealthy family as love and still presumptuously come to me to show off. 2. When I met Perry, he was only 8 years old and not yet the lost and found youngest son of the Perry family. We were both abducted by human traffickers and sold to the master's family for many years. It wasn't until the police rescued us and sent us to the orphanage. In the orphanage, sometimes we didn't have enough to eat and would also be bullied and framed. But compared to our previous lives, it was much better. Because we were too old, no one was willing to adopt us. Perry and I supported each other all the way and relied on each other as we entered society. We have experienced the bitterness of being cheated of money, and also the embarrassment of being looked down upon when sharing a bowl of noodles. In the coldest winter in Linchuan City, the heating in the rental house was cut off. I leaned on Perry's shoulder and looked out of the window through the window of the rental house. I asked him, Perry, what's your dream? He took my hand and said in a deep voice, make a lot of money and marry Arya gloriously. Arya is me. Perry really did it. He gave me a unique ring in the world and a wedding dress studded with diamonds. When he married me, there was a sea of flowers for 10 miles. 10,000 drones turned into a meteor shower and formed my name in the sky. That day, all the headlines on the entertainment page were about the wedding banquet of the Perry family that cost hundreds of millions. People around me all said they envied me. They said that as a famous family in Beijing, the Perry family actually allowed Perry to marry someone like me who has no background and no identity. How could I not know the efforts Perry made for this? There are still traces of family discipline whippings on his back until now. The branches of the Perry family are eyeing Cove to Sly. In order to snatch business, Perry often comes back in the middle of the night. He runs between domestic and foreign places. Once he came back so tired that he even vomited blood. Looking at his gradually thinning back, I was extremely distressed but could do nothing. I could only restrain my temper and try hard to learn to be a good Mrs. Perry. 3. At a dinner party where powerful people gathered, the ladies got together and casually talked about the romantic affairs of their husband's infidelity. Love seems to be a joke to them. Seeing me silent, Mrs. Victoria on the side took my hand. Arya, you will have to get used to it in the future. The business of the Perry family is getting bigger and bigger in Perry's hands. Sooner or later, he will keep a few understanding flowers. I was stunned and then firmly shook my head. Perry won't. Mrs. Victoria smiled slightly, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. She said, when people stand at a high position of power, they will face countless. Her gaze at me was like looking at something else through me. 4. I never believed that Perry would betray me. So when I saw through the crack of the door that Perry allowed a woman to kiss him and another woman to unbutton his clothes, I felt like I was dreaming. I had never seen Perry like this. He sat there lazily and casually took a puff of cigarette. The exhaled smoke blurred his face. The coldness seeping from my limbs gradually spread to my heart, making me unable to move. It wasn't until a certain guest at the banquet suddenly noticed me and stood up in a panic and called me Mrs. Perry that I finally came to my senses. I forgot what Perry's expression was at that time. I only remember that he pushed away those women, hurriedly chased after me, and tightly hugged me in his arms. He kept saying in my ear over and over again, "Arya, don't cry. I love you. I only love you." He said he only loved me, and that such a thing would never happen again. I don't know if these words were to comfort me or to comfort himself. It is said that when people encounter something painful, the first thing they think of is to escape. But can things be treated as if they never happened if we escape? That night, looking at Perry's sleeping face, tears silently flowed down. My heart ached as if being tortured. Once the seed of doubt is planted, it will take root and sprout in the heart. During that time, I felt like I had turned into a suspicious neurotic. Every business trip of Perry, every cocktail party, every vibration of his mobile phone, and every answered call can become a reason for my anxiety. Finally, on a night when Perry came home late, a war broke out between me and him. I smelled the fragrance of gardenias on his coat. I questioned him and yelled at him hysterically. Not only did I break all the precious porcelain at home, but I also broke our wedding photo in the hall. "Arya, in this circle, no one can stay aloof." Perry pinched the space between his eyebrows feebly and looked at me complexly. "It's me who is sorry for you. But you are the only one I love the most." Perry left. Before leaving, he also said that I should calm down. I collapsed and knelt on the ground, covering my face and crying loudly. The glass got my palm, and blood and tears were mixed together. I have thought about divorce, but I am not reconciled. Really not reconciled. I tried to resist worldly desires with shallow love. As a result, it can be imagined, the suppressed pain made me suffer from depression. I trapped myself in past memories and in the vows Perry once made. Lady Victoria was the first person to discover that I was sick. She sighed and held my hand tightly. "Arya, you are following in my old footsteps." I lowered my eyes and my heart sank to the bottom. I don't know if Perry will feel guilty. His wife tried to commit suicide by slitting her wrist at home due to depression. And he, with a beauty in his arms, is indulging in pleasure. 5 Mio will not be Perry's last canary. Before a few days had passed, I heard at a party that Perry had recently taken on a pair of sisters. The elder sister is gentle, and the younger sister is bright and beautiful. I heard that the sisters are very open in bed. No wonder when Perry comes home, there is a hint of satisfaction in his expression. Perry came back very early tonight, probably after taking a bath. He carried the fragrance of shower gel. "I heard from Auntie that you painted for 3 hours. Are you tired?" Perry hugged me from behind and buried his head in my shoulder. I put down my paintbrush, broke free from his embrace, and put away my painting tools one by one. No. During the period when I was depressed, I fell in love with painting. Probably because only when I am painting can I subconsciously forget those people and things that suffocate me. "Arya, this painting of yours is really beautiful." Perry's gentle voice came, and I unconsciously curved my eyes. Yes, it should be painted more beautifully. After all, this painting is for giving away. By the way, Mom asked me to ask if we will go home for the spring festival this year. She said she couldn't get through to you. Perry took a tissue and patiently wiped the paint stains on my hands. His movements were as gentle as treating a piece of porcelain. "No." I refused categorically and took back my hand. "By the way, the mom in Perry's mouth is my biological mother. Over the years, Perry has been using his connections to help me find my family. Finally, 2 years ago, he found them. My biological father has passed away, and my mother has remarried and given birth to a younger sister for me. She is a senior this year and is about to graduate soon. Her real purpose for asking me to go home for the spring festival this time is to ask me to arrange a job for my sister and get her into Perry's company. Mother said that she feels very guilty towards me, so she has doubled the love for me to my younger sister. But now that I am back and we have recognized each other, shouldn't she be nicer to me? But the fact is that she seldom contacts me. I am always the one who sends her messages, telling her to be safe when it rains, keep warm when it snows, and send her gifts on festivals. Obviously I have said that I am allergic to celery, but she still puts celery in my bowl. From her, I can't see her love for me. What's wrong? Are you having a fight with her? Perry rubbed my hair, and there was a hint of a smile in his words. I don't want to maintain this affection anymore. It's very tiring. From now on, she is no longer my mom. I looked into Perry's eyes and said lightly. Perhaps my words were too straightforward. Perry was stunned for a moment, not knowing what he thought of. He pursed his lips tightly and looked up at me. Arya, you seem to have changed a lot. I smiled. Really? Yes. Perry blinked at me like a child, his tone full of grievance. In the past, at night, you would always ask me when I would come back for dinner. Now it seems that you haven't asked for a long time. In the morning, you won't pick out a tie for me anymore. But Perry, people don't change suddenly. When I ask when you will come back, you say you still have work to do, but actually you are having an affair with other women. The tie I picked for you will be taken off in another way between the sheets. These are constantly reminding me that your betrayal makes me feel disgusted. 6 on the morning of New Year's Eve, I was pasting Spring Festival couplets at the door of the studio. Perry called and said that he would come back early tonight and spend New Year's Eve with me at home. I said, okay. Then I hung up the phone. Because I am not tall enough, I can't paste the upper part of the door frame and still need to stand on tiptoe. Just as I was thinking about whether to get a stool, a fair and slender hand suddenly held the falling red paper. I turned around and looked up at the young man in front of me. He was wearing a white sweatshirt. There was a smile in his peach blossom eyes, and his eyebrows were full of affection. Arya, it's not enough to work without calling me. I met Ethan at an art exhibition. Coincidentally, every time I go to an art exhibition, Perry will push aside meetings and accompany me. Only that time he didn't. At that time, I stopped in front of an oil painting full of sunflowers. Its brush-up made me feel somewhat familiar, reminding me of the painting of the seabed that I bought at a public welfare activity a year ago. The wives who were with me all thought I was crazy to spend $30 million to buy an unknown painting. I am not a person who loves to spend money. I bought that painting purely because I saw myself in that painting. The hesitant, painful, and struggling self. The sunflowers in front of me are warm and brilliant, like beating notes. If these two paintings are by the same author, I am quite curious. In just 1 year, what on earth has he experienced for his state of mind to change so much? Afan appeared at that time. I raised my eyes and accidentally bumped into the young man's burning gaze. Do you like it? If you like it, I can give it to you. I thought he was joking until the organizer of the art exhibition found me and put the painting in my hand. 7 since that day, Ethan has begun to frequently appear in my life, even if I am as dull as a wooden block. I also understand what he is thinking. I have emphasized the fact that I am married more than once. However, he is still the same and turns a deaf ear to my warning to him. Finally, during an outdoor sketching session, I unceremoniously had a falling out with him. Do you know? I hate people like you the most, who are willing to be a mistress and destroy other people's families. Can you stop appearing in front of me? I really feel sick when I see you. Ethan was stunned for several seconds. His back when he left was very lonely. What I said that day was really effective. However, it only lasted for 2 days. Ethan has a flamboyant personality and is like 2 extremes from me at that time. But he is also a bit like me. Once he has determined something, He will not give up easily. Sometimes I am troubled by his stubbornness. But at a certain moment, I am glad that he has always been behind me. When I need him, he appears like a godsend. That's when we came out of the amusement park with Ethan. It was already very late. The phone vibrated buzzing. Perry was calling me again. I simply turned off the phone. Is it okay if you don't answer the phone? Ethan raised his eyebrows and his voice was faint. I chuckled and asked him, "Where shall we go next?" He happily took out a pink helmet and put it on me. At the end, he bent down and tapped on the helmet, looking meaningfully behind me. To a place where he can't find us. The motorcycle started, and the tires made a harsh sound on the ground. I subconsciously hugged Ethan's waist. He carried me through the empty streets and deep alleys. There was the whistling wind in my ears, and the lights of thousands of households came into view. Before long, gorgeous fireworks bloomed in the night sky. Ethan shouted towards the sky, "In the new year, I hope Arya is safe and happy," and boldly moves forward. I curved my eyes and eyebrows and shouted like him. 9 When I returned to the villa, it was already late at night. The hall was not lit, and there was a very strong smell of smoke. Perry was sitting warily on the sofa. When he saw me coming back, he suddenly stood up and forced a smile. "Arya, I couldn't reach you on the phone. Did you go to Mom's for the new year?" I hummed and took a step down, following the excuse he had found for me. Just as I was about to turn off the light and go to sleep, Perry's hoarse voice suddenly sounded beside my ear. "Arya, I had a dream last night. I dreamed that you fell in love with someone else and didn't want me anymore." After a few seconds, he asked again, "Arya, will you always love me?" Probably because I didn't reply for a long time, Perry propped up his body and stared at me anxiously, as if trying to see the answer from my eyes. I suddenly found it a bit funny. Fate is really a cycle. In the past, I had asked myself more than once, does Perry really still love me? At that time, I felt that he seemed to love me. He planted all the flowers I like in the yard. When I was sick, he bought the sky price of La Shui Bay and established an art foundation in my name. One year when I was sick, in order to get a peace talisman for me, with snowflakes flying all over the sky, he kowtowed step by step from the foot of the mountain to the top. Right? He loves me. Right? But his love can be given to many people. He can love me, but at the same time be ambiguous with other women. I know Perry plays around a lot. In that circle, it is very common to play around and even play with multiple people at the same time. The wives who drink tea together also persuade me not to take love too seriously. But I am not reconciled. So, I began to look for various details in life, to prove that compared with other women, Perry loves me a little more. Until Ethan told me that true love doesn't need to be proved. Ken, probably because of the new year, Perry has been staying at home these days. When I came back from the studio, I was surprised to see him wearing an apron and cooking in the kitchen. "Why did you suddenly think of cooking by yourself?" I leaned against the wall and asked Perry in surprise. "Arya, I thought of our past." Perry raised his eyes, and his gaze towards me was gentle and doting. "The days when we worked hard together cannot be replaced by anyone." I was in a trance for a moment. "The past is really a very long time ago." 21-year-old Perry said. "I only cook for my wife and only love my wife." 22-year-old Perry said. "It's too painful for a woman to give birth. Arya, let's not have children in the future. Okay?" 23-year-old Perry said. "Arya can live without Perry, but Perry will die without Arya." At that time, we were extremely ambitious and only had each other in our eyes. We always felt that true love was invincible. But later we found out that we were too naive. True love is invincible. But true love also changes in an instant. 11 Just thinking about it, I suddenly felt extremely boring. "What are you thinking about?" Perry came out after taking a bath and hugged me from behind. His warm breath sprayed on my neck. He tentatively bit my earlobe. and his hand skillfully lifted my pajamas. Arya, let's have a baby. Yes. It's really extremely boring. Perry is no longer the Perry of the past. And I am no longer the Arya of the past. I pressed Perry's mischievous hand, turned around, and said inferently, Perry, I'm afraid of getting AIDS. Perry's face instantly turned pale, and he stared at me for several seconds. In fact, on New Year's Eve that day, you found me, right? After coming out of the amusement park, I noticed a car following us. That was Perry's car. He thought that as long as it wasn't made explicit, our relationship would be the same as before. Little did he know that under the calm surface of the lake there were turbulent waves. Our marriage had long been on the verge of collapse. Arya. Perry spoke tremulously. I sighed. I had known Perry for 20 years and been married to him for 3 years. At this moment, our fate had finally come to an end. Do you remember that fire in the villa? I asked Perry. Yes. I remember. It was because the stove was left on. But in fact, that fire was set on purpose by me. Meeting Perry's shocked eyes, I suddenly had a feeling of having gone through the past and being relieved in my heart. 12 I am a nostalgic person. The things we had in the rental house back then. From large items like washing machines and televisions to a small paper crane folded by Perry for me. I didn't throw away any of them. I put them all in a special room. But that fire almost burned all my memories with Perry. Not knowing what he was thinking of, Perry looked at me with hesitation in his eyes. You guessed right. It was to burn those things. At the moment the fire broke out and thick smoke billowed, I suddenly had a terrifying thought and walked straight towards the firelight. If Ethan hadn't suddenly called me, I might have really been burned to death. Why? Perry grabbed my hand, somewhat on the verge of collapse. You ask why. Harry, don't you really know? I looked up at him. Harry staggered back a step, all the color on his face fading. I got up and walked into the bedroom. I pulled out a box from under the bed and poured out all the things in the box. Every time you are ambiguous with a woman, I will write a letter. Here. There are a total of letters. I pulled out a drawer and poured out the medicine in the bottle. What I take every day is not health supplements but medicine for treating depression. In Perry's absent-minded case, I unbuttoned my clothes and showed him the scar on my stomach. I lied to you and said the scar was from when I bumped into something while traveling. In fact, it wasn't. I turned my head, and tears somehow flowed out disobediently. Perry, we once had our own child. But on that day, I had a car accident and the child was gone. The only proof that she had come to this world is this shallow scar. Arya, why didn't you tell me these things? Perry's eyes were red-rimmed, looking at me with heartache. His voice was full of sorrow. Perry, I called you. But at that time, you were playing with uniforms on the bed with another woman. On the day of the car accident, I was bleeding a lot. I tremblingly took out my phone. My first thought was not to call an ambulance but to call Perry. The phone rang for a long time before it was answered. I cried and called Perry's name several times, but a woman's voice came from the other end. I heard that woman Kokalgathasly say that she didn't want to play a nurse next time. I also heard Perry lazily say yes, and then the sound of tearing open a packaging bag. At that time, I was tightly clutching the phone. My heart was like being cut by a knife. I felt as if I had fallen into an ice cave. It was as if countless cold arrows had pierced my body. When my consciousness gradually blurred, I saw Ethan anxiously push through the crowd and rush to my side. His lips were moving, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. I could only grab his hand and say over and over again, I'm in so much pain. It was really painful. Not only did my body hurt, but my heart also hurt. Perry, telling you these things is not to make you pity me. But I want you to know that there is no longer any possibility between us. Perry sat on the edge of the bed. His eyes dim and his hands helplessly inserted into his hair. Arya, I broke my vow. It's all my fault. Why does God want to hurt you? He should punish me. There was a hint of choking in Perry's voice. How did it come to this? He suddenly burst into tears like a child. Yes. How did it come to this? I also asked myself countless times back then. After all, we were so in love once. But it wasn't until today that I suddenly realized. In this relationship, I have shown my greatest sincerity. So the person who should be regretful and unwilling should not be me. Perry. Let's get a divorce. In a good mood. I said this sentence calmly. I also want to move on. I glanced out of the window and let out a gentle sigh. 13A cold air suddenly hit Linchuan City. This winter seems colder than ever before. Ethan tied a scarf around my neck. I didn't want to wear it because I thought it didn't match my clothes today. He was gnashing his teeth in anger beside me. Arya. If you don't listen to good advice, you will suffer losses. Although he said so, he still put my hand into his coat pocket and held it tightly. Jenna appeared at this moment. She looked at me and Ethan with a complicated expression. Her brows were so wrinkled that they could squash a fly. Jenna. That is my biological mother. In the coffee shop, I sat face to face with her. Ethan was waiting for me outside. What's the matter? I composed myself. Arya, are you really going to divorce Perry? Yes. Marriage is not a child's play. For a man of Perry's status, which one doesn't cheat? You should be a magnanimous woman and try to tolerate and understand him. Jenna looked at me with a solemn expression. Seeing that I was somewhat indifferent, there was some dissatisfaction in her expression. The boy outside is many years younger than you. Right. Arya. You are almost 30. You are not young anymore. Can you guarantee that he will love you forever? I can't stand the sarcasm in her words and can't help but interrupt her. Did Perry send you here as a lobbyist? The woman's expression remains unchanged. I let out a soft chuckle. It seems not. Let me guess. Then it's Cynthia's father who has a request for Perry. Cynthia's father is the husband my mother found later. A trace of embarrassment flashed across Jenna's face but quickly returned to normal. Arya. Mom is doing this for your own good. What a pretext of doing it for my own good. I'll just ask you one question. If Cynthia's husband cheats on her in the future, will you persuade her like this too? Cynthia is Cynthia's father's daughter. That is my half-sister. Jenna's eyes dodged and she didn't dare to look at me. I stood up and let out a cold chuckle. Ms. Jenna, our mother-daughter relationship is shallow. Let's end it here. And also, for Cynthia's father's small company, I will tell Perry to definitely not offer any help. After being husband and wife for a while, he can still meet this request of mine. After hearing this, Jenna's face suddenly darkened. Her voice was sharp and her face was tinged with anger. Arya, we are family. I curled my lip in disdain. We're not on the same household registration booklet. How can we be considered family? 14 divorce is not as smooth as I imagined. The lawyer called again and bluntly said that the other party's lawyer has been dragging it out and is never satisfied with how the divorce agreement is drafted. The last time I saw Perry was 2 weeks ago, at the entrance of the villa. His chin was bruised, and there was no luster in his eyes. Looking at my luggage being moved out, he asked hoarsely, "Do you really have to leave? I can move out of the villa." No need. I shook my head. Before leaving, Perry called me and said that he had dealt with that woman. I suddenly remembered the phone call I answered that day. There was a lot of noise on the other end of the phone, accompanied by the sound of glass shattering. The woman screamed and apologized to me while sobbing. If she hadn't called out my name, I would have called the police. I always know Perry's methods. That woman's fate should not be good. 15 I thought for a while and still dialed Perry's phone number. Let's talk. There's no point in dragging this on like this. That day, Perry drove me from the south of the city to the north. He kept talking all the way. Arya, do you remember this place? The first parrot we raised was bought here. He pointed to the flower and bird market on the left. Arya, why is the entrance of J.I.U. supermarket still the same as before? It's so crowded that there's not even a place to park a car. I don't know if the night market in the North District is still open. Has the fried stinky tofu all you love moved away? Not knowing what he thought of, Perry curved his eyes and eyebrows. You were always fond of smelly things back then. I looked out of the window and remained silent. Perry doesn't know that in fact, after getting married, I have walked through these places by myself many times. Those stinky tofu and durian that I like to eat. Since becoming Mrs. Perry, I haven't eaten them anymore. Arya, the wonton shop we used to eat at is still open. The car suddenly stopped in front of a wonton shop. There was a hint of surprise in Perry's voice. The wonton shop is very close to our previous rental house. In the past, when we went to work in the morning, and sometimes didn't have time to cook, we would go eat wontons. It was very hot in summer and I was also very sleepy. Perry would fold the flyers on the table into a small fan and fan me. After fanning me, he would fan the wontons. When the wontons cooled down, he would wake me up. In a flash. Many years have passed. Let's eat here again. Perry turned his head and looked at me pleadingly. I hesitated for a few seconds and nodded. The proprietor still remembers us. She put two steaming bowls of wontons in front of us and said to Perry with a smile, "Little guy, you're finally here. Auntie hasn't seen you for a long time. Several times it was your girlfriend who came alone." The smile on Perry's face suddenly froze. He looked up at me abruptly. I lowered my eyes and explained faintly. "Auntie, we've broken up." There was some embarrassment on the aunt's face. After she left, Perry asked me softly, "Arya, have you been here many times?" "Yeah. After a long time." He lowered his head and the fingertips holding the spoon turned white. "I'm really a beast." With the steam rolling, I couldn't see Perry's expression. "Get the divorce agreement done as soon as possible. Don't make it too ugly. I don't want our next meeting to be in court." As soon as I said this, I saw Perry's eyelashes tremble and a tear fell into the chicken soup. "I know." His voice was hoarse. Extra. Perry and Arya's divorce shocked the whole circle. Once their love was so enviable, now it's so lamentable. Perry left the house cleanly and only kept the villa where he and Arya used to live. The villa is empty and without a trace of human presence. Perry thought of when they first moved in. Arya pestered him to go to the mall to buy home appliances together. Why is it so complicated when it can be arranged with just one phone call? Perry was puzzled. Arya smiled brightly. "You don't understand. This is called life." At that time, Arya was holding his arm and bargaining with the mall manager. Looking at her chattering nonstop, he found her extremely lovely. Thinking of this, Perry sitting on the sofa unconsciously curved the corner of his mouth. "Arya." Perry subconsciously called out Arya's name. Unfortunately, only the ticking sound of the wall clock responded to him. He hastily stood up and accidentally bumped into the corner of the table, stumbling and running to the room on the second floor where they lived. But when he opened the door, there was no one he was longing for inside. The man in his 30s sat helplessly on the ground and shed tears. He wanted to find some past objects to keep as a memento, but there was nothing left. Arya didn't leave anything, except for that letter. Every time he opened it and read it, every word was heart-rending. But who could he blame? It was all his own fault. It was he who betrayed Arya first. Betrayed marriage. And betrayed love. Reaping the consequences of one's own actions is deserved. When the news of Arya's engagement reached Perry's ears, Perry suddenly had a very absurd thought. If Arya was willing, he could be the lesser one. At the end, he smiled. He felt that he was too naive. Arya probably found it disgusting to even look at him. Before Arya got engaged, Perry had gone to find Ethan. He felt that as the person who would spend his life with Arya in the future, he always had to take a look. See if that person was reliable and treated Arya well. Perry waited for a long time and finally squatted down and found Ethan downstairs. "Let's talk." Ethan nodded and readily chose a place. Before Perry could ask a question, Ethan spoke first. If you are here to persuade me to give up, you can give up on that thought as soon as possible. Ethan had been known as the other woman's man for many years and was scolded by Arya. After finally waiting for her to get divorced and being so close to success. At this time, even if the God of heaven came, it would be impossible for him to give up. If you are worried that Arya will be wronged, then you are overthinking. I am not a dead person. My parents also like Arya very much. Perry had long investigated Ethan's background. Ethan's family did business abroad. Ethan also had an elder brother who died unexpectedly. After his elder brother passed away, Ethan took over his family's business and was also very successful. Ethan returned to China a few years ago. Presumably, he also wanted to expand his business in China. Ethan had said everything. What else could Perry say? When leaving, Ethan received a phone call. The ice and snow in his eyes instantly melted. Perry probably guessed who was calling. Arya said to let me buy some vegetables and make her favorite sweet and our spare ribs. Ethan tugged at his collar and inadvertently revealed the diamond ring on his hand. Mr. Perry, would you like to come to our house for dinner? My cooking skills are still quite good. Sweet and sour spare ribs. Perry's face paled. When he was with Arya before, he often made this dish. After making it many times, Perry would ask, really not getting tired of it? At that time, Arya put one's arm around his neck and said with a smile, the food Perry makes. I will never get tired of it in my life. No need. Please treat her well. Perry thought to himself that asking him to have dinner was really killing him with heartbreak. 3 on the day Arya got married, Perry dissolved the company. He locked himself in the villa and just sat on the ground all the time. He estimated the time. The wedding should be coming to an end now. What is Arya doing now? Is she toasting? Or giving out wedding candies? Perry, sitting on the ground, curved a bitter smile. He finally knew what Arya felt in her heart when she found him with another woman back then. In fact, on that day when he came out of the Civil Affairs Bureau and looked at Arya's back, Perry had already realized that they would never have any intersection in this life. However, he stubbornly didn't want to admit it. Sometimes Perry would deliberately drive to the place where Arya lived to see if he could meet Arya. Unexpectedly, he really met her once. Arya's shoelace wasn't tied. He saw Ethan squat down and gently tied a bow for her. Seeing them coming out of the supermarket, Arya was holding a sugar-coated hawthorn. Ethan gently wiped the corner of her mouth. At that time, Perry was a little dazed. Those affectionate scenes. Obviously, the protagonist should have been him and Darya. How did it become Ethan and Darya? How did he lose Arya? His heart ached as if being cut by a knife. It was like an invisible hand was tightly squeezing his heart. The sharp nails pierced the membrane that wrapped the heart. Perry was so oppressed that he could hardly breathe. His heart ached so much that he wished he could kill himself. Those who betray true love will swallow 10,000 needles. When Perry stood up from the ground, he suddenly thought of this sentence. He took a knife from the kitchen and slashed his wrist hard. Blood gushed out instantly and dripped onto the wooden floor. Once a master had told Perry that in his life, he was destined to be alone. He didn't think it was accurate at that time, but now it really came true. Perry sat on the balcony and opened the window. The spring wind was like a lover's kiss, lingering and delicate. Looking at the little bit of green emerging outside the window, he gradually lost consciousness. Hopefully, in the next life, Perry can treat his Arya well. Extra. Ethan won. Arya got extremely angry again and even angrily smashed the bowl. Ethan, why are you here again? Do you know how to write the word shame? Do your parents know that you are being the other woman's man outside? Ethan awkwardly touched the tip of his nose. He didn't say anything on the surface, but the drum in his heart was beating very loudly. Other woman's man is someone who destroys other people's feelings. Whose feelings did he, Ethan, destroy? Is there still any affection between Arya and Perry? To Ethan once experienced a low point in his life and almost couldn't get out of it. That year, Ethan and his elder brother had a car accident. In order to protect him, His elder brother unfortunately passed away. Asan was lucky to save half his life but also lay in the hospital bed for several months. Immersed in the pain of his elder brother's death, he locked himself in the studio all day long and gave up on himself for a long time. He felt that he didn't deserve to live and tried to commit suicide countless times. Finally, Ethan's mother couldn't stand it anymore and slapped him and asked him how on earth could he look forward. He randomly pointed to a painting and said that if that painting could be sold for 30 million, it would mean that he wasn't supposed to die. 30 million. He thought that no one would spend 30 million on a painting unless they were out of their minds. But fate is so wonderful. That painting was bought by Arya. He disguised himself as a staff member and asked Arya the reason for buying the painting. When delivering the painting, after hearing her answer, he suddenly had a very complicated feeling. In addition to mutual sympathy, there was also another feeling. After knowing that Arya was already married and that the relationship between the husband and wife was very harmonious, he was happy for her, but at the same time felt very lost and regretful. He himself couldn't tell why this was. 3. That day, Ethan saw Perry abroad. However, the person in his arms was not his wife but another woman, a model. Ethan felt sorry for Arya. After feeling sorry for her, he suddenly felt that his chance had come and immediately booked a ticket back to his country. But the road to chasing his wife is long. Arya often scolded him as a mistress and like an indelible chewing gum. There were all kinds of nasty words. But it's okay. Dude is very optimistic and has a thick enough skin.